How do you determine the value of a vacant acre of land in Hawaii? We'll talk about that coming up next. Hey, what's going on, friends? I got asked recently about helping to figure out the value of a vacant acre of land. So if you're looking for land in Hawaii and you're trying to figure out what is a fair price that I should pay, because if you look at listings online, the range is crazy, right? I mean, anywhere from $8,000 to $10 million an acre, you can find land just here on the Big Island. On other islands, it's similar. The range is crazy. And there are some obvious things that you can read into to figure out why that's the case, right? If you're in a multi-million dollar gated community with a bunch of billionaires, obviously the cost per acre is going to be a lot higher. And if you're in a very rural area, it's going to be lower. But there's a lot of considerations that you really want to take into account when you're trying to just compare maybe two similar looking pieces of land in a similar area, and to figure out why is one priced one way and why is another one priced another way. And so I try to break this down and kind of give you some factors to consider. But the first one is usability, right? Two pieces of similar looking land could have very different usability, right? Is a slope really crazy on one? Is there a flood zone flowing through the middle of one? Are there archaeological sites that restrict what you can build on one of them versus another one that another one doesn't have? What's the access to the property? Are you gonna have to put in $100,000 worth of grading and a driveway in order to access it and actually use it? So there's all these types of factors where you could have two pieces of property that are in a similar area that look alike but may have very different situations when you dig a little bit deeper. And so obviously the value and the cost per acre is gonna be very different. Even though they could look like comparable pieces of property, they're not when you dig a little bit deeper. The other thing is zoning. Zoning's a big one. Can you subdivide it? You can have pieces of property that are relatively close in location, but one may have residential zoning where you could subdivide it and make it into smaller lots. One may be zone ag 5 and it's 5 acres, and you'd have to get a change of zoning in order to subdivide it. And so that would change the value of those two pieces of property. Also, if you have commercial or resort zoning, you're going to have a much higher value cost per acre for that piece of property, because the highest and best use in the future could be a lot higher than it would be if it's just zone agricultural or residential. And so that's another thing to kind of think about and look at, is the zoning and what are your potential uses for the property in the future, because that's going to affect the value of it now. And utilities are a big one. You could have two pieces of property that are similar in location, but one may be too high to get county water to, one may be completely off the grid, and you're going to have to run several hundred feet of telephone poles, which could cost you $10,000 to $20,000 per pole to get electric to it. The access to utilities can vary greatly on vacant land, and that's something that you kind of want to look at and see if that's important to you. And having utilities is important to you. What is the cost to bring the utilities to that piece of property? Because that could be a deterrent on someone purchasing it, because there's a really high cost to bring utilities to it. So if you look at all of this, the short story is it's very hard to apply a general cost per acre unless you take all of these things into consideration and really dig deeply and figure out, what exactly do I want to use the land for? What is my potential future use for it? What are the costs in order for me to build on it and actually use it today? There's all of these things that you really want to take into consideration. And so don't get caught up too much on like trying to take an average cost per acre across the board in an area and figure out what the fair market value is, because you really have to look at each individual piece of property, dig into it, figure out what all the specifics are, and then kind of figure out, okay, does this make sense given all of these factors? And maybe you can get a better deal if you're willing to spend some money on the back end, because there's some things that are preventing it from selling in its current form. So all things you want to think about, all reasons why you want to have a professional involved that understands where to look and where to do this due diligence and figure this stuff out, because it could get complicated and it could get costly if you don't do the proper due diligence before getting into it. So if you have any questions, you can always email me at dylan@buybigisland.com or book a meeting at the county link below. And as always, thanks for watching. See you guys next week. Aloha.